Hey everybody, Pastor Hans here. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Daily Dose this week. This week, we're going to take a look at one book of the Bible, and it's a short book of the Bible. It's very short. In fact, you could sit down and read it in less than a half hour. The book is the book of Jonah. And no doubt, somewhere along the way, whether you consider yourself a Christian, you grew up in church, or you didn't grow up in church, you have heard the story of Jonah and that big old fish, that big old whale. Well, this week, we're going to talk all about that story. And I want to challenge you, if you haven't yet this week, sit down with your Bible or download the Bible app. It's this slick app. Download it on your phone and read the book of Jonah. I'm going to get us kicked off by talking about just the first few verses of the book of Jonah. But before I do, I want to tell you about a season in my life. It was a season in my life that was really, really hard. And it actually had me running from God. Most of you, if you consider Calvary your church home, you know that when I was a kid, I lost my mother. I was in 5th grade and 10 years old, and I remember distinctly my mother getting sick. She was flown to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and she would pass away with some complications due to a severe diabetic condition and lupus and a staph infection. She would pass away, and she'd leave me, my brother, and my sister, and my father. Well, fast forward a year later, and my father would remarry. And this is where things got kind of ugly, if I'm really honest, for our family growing up. My dad would remarry rather quickly and get into a relationship. Well, let's just say it wasn't the best relationship. In fact, it was pretty tough. In fact, for a number of years, our family, there was a ton of pain. There was a ton of hurt. There was distrust. It was an unhealthy season. There was even some abuse that was a part of our family. And as I looked at where I had come from and where I was as this young man trying to navigate middle school and all the pressures of the world, as I looked at and remembered the life I had when my mother was a part of my life and that nurturing and care and love, and I looked at where I was, man, I knew something was wrong. And I thought to myself, I'm sure you've thought this from time to time, if there is a God out there, why in the world would God let something like this happen? And you better believe there were moments where I just ran from God. I didn't want anything to do with the church, with faith, with this God. I'm guessing just maybe you've had some experiences like that. Maybe you wouldn't say it out loud, or maybe you've said it out loud a number of times. Maybe it's dictated your life. You've walked away the church because of that divorce, because of that unexpected death in your life, where you looked at God and said, if there's really a God, how could you let this happen? Maybe you've experienced a loss, some financial woes, maybe bankruptcy. Maybe you've had a business that was just ridiculously successful closed down because of whatever reason. Maybe for you, you look at what happened with this pandemic and you said, really, God? Or maybe you look at the politics in our world. You look at what's going on in our world today and you throw your hands in the air. You see, I think there are these moments in our lives where things don't go our way. And we say, either that must be your fault, God, or we say, there just can't be a God. And we run from it all. Well, it's interesting. In the book of Jonah, Jonah does much the same thing. In the opening verses of the book of Jonah, we hear this. Now, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, go at once to Nineveh, head that way, to that great city, and cry out against it. There was some injustice going on in Nineveh, and God said, I want you to go there, for their wickedness has come up before me. It says in verse 3, but Jonah, rather than heading that way, he fled that way to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He said, no way. If there's that injustice going on there, I don't want anything to do with you, God. So rather than heading that way, he headed in the opposite direction. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid his fare and he went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Just like us. That's what I love about the Bible. Jonah ran from God. But of course, you know the story of Jonah, and you know that's not the end of the story. In fact, what I love about this story is that the Bible records this ridiculous event of Jonah heading out on this ship, eventually finding himself in the ocean, and what saves him? A big old whale, a giant fish, it says, swallowed him, and God spit him out from that whale on dry land. What does that say to people like you and people like me who from time to time wonder, is there a God? People like you and me who run from God? Well, here's what it teaches me, that we have a God who will use whatever means necessary to rescue people like you and people like me. When I think of the loss of my mother and all that would transpire, I remember when I met my wife, Katie, and I said, I just want to warn you, I've got some baggage. And what I came to realize is that Katie was one of those people in my life who were well, don't tell her I said this, my whale. She was my big fish, if you will. She was the one in my life who scooped me up and said, I don't care where you've been or what you've been through. I'm going to love you through thick and thin. You see, we have a God who will use whatever means necessary, friends, so that you will know that you are loved, you are cherished, you are a child of God, whatever you think of this God. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. If you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and share this post. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the bell so you get notifications. If you're watching on cable access, invite a friend to watch with you.